Republican lawmakers in Tennessee showing their true authoritarian colors, hustling to shut down critical comments versus taking any action to save their youngest citizens from the crisis of gun violence. During a special session to address gun violence, crying parents of children massacred in the March shooting at the Covenant School held up small signs of protest. Moments later, Republican lawmakers ordered state troopers to swoop in and physically remove them from the hearing. Take a look.
It denies our First Amendment rights.
What about the ongoing problem?
What about our First Amendment rights? We have rights to hold a sign. This is not what democracy looks like.
On that same day, state Republicans also advanced new procedural rules with extreme penalties for lawmakers deemed, quote, too disruptive, while also banning visitors from carrying signs and limiting public access to state hearings. Joining me now, Tennessee Democratic State Representative Justin J. Pearson, who reclaimed his seat in a special election this month. Representative Pearson, it's an honor to have you on the show. For those of you that have been following along, you were expelled out of the State House for expressing your support for reasonable gun control. On Monday, some Covenant parents kicked out of a hearing for holding signs, and then the next day, protesters showed up to the House chamber with gun control messages written on their bodies and on their clothes in defiance of that sign ban. Some of those parents, though, Representative, were Republican voters, some that were protesting. Are you seeing a growing energy from both sides to hold Republicans accountable?
Yes, we are building a multiracial, multi-generational, multi-ethnic, multi-socioeconomic movement of people across the political spectrum who want to see us do something about protecting kids and not guns. And the reality is the Republican Party is operating as cowards. They are only following the voices of the National Rifle Association, the Tennessee Firearms Association, and the American Firearms Association, the way that they are operating. And the destruction of the democracy in Tennessee by taking away people's right to hold signs, representatives' right to speak freely on behalf of those who sent us here, is a continuation of bad policies and bad practices that have been operating in the Tennessee General Assembly for quite a long time. What is in peril is our democracy. And what we are seeing is a mobocracy replacing our democracy, where mob rules and not the people in our state.
Your Republican Governor Bill Lee, he actually called this special session in April, shortly after the Covenant shooting. Your Republican colleagues in this week's special session, they're showing such blatant disrespect for the memories of those that have been slain and those that have survived thereafter. I mean, what conversations have you had with your colleagues about this level of disregard for just human life?
Mm-hmm. I continue to urge my colleagues to do something about preventing gun violence. Instead, we are seeing laws being put forward by my colleagues that instead want to count the number of mass shootings that occur. They want to make sure we have alert systems for when mass shootings happen in our schools, but they don't want to do anything to prevent assault rifles from getting to the schoolhouse door. They don't want to do anything from preventing people who shouldn't have guns from having access to them. And so all that our legislative session has become, unfortunately, is an opportunity for us to prepare for tragedies instead of prevent them. And these same colleagues are going to be the ones who offer thoughts and prayers. There was a mass shooting in my district just a couple of weeks ago, but instead of preventing the mass tragedy, which we can do as legislators, we're only in a situation where we're preparing for it. And worse, as still, not only are they not caring about the memories of the children we have lost in our community and our loved ones in District 86 and across our state, they're passing laws or seeking to pass laws now like blended sentencing, which is trying kids as adults to send them to adult prison. So instead of protecting kids, we're trying to penalize kids more. This is the type of legislature we are in, and this is the type of pain that is being caused by the Republican Party, Cameron Sexton, William Lambert, here in the state of Tennessee.
You know, after the public was kicked out, one parent was allowed to return to testify against the bill that allows for more armed teachers in your schools. That parent said the Covenant teachers' hands were shaking so badly that day while trying to keep the children quiet, safe, and secure that there's no way that those teachers could have handled a gun. Why is this message about how impactful this is, not only on the teachers, the students, the parents, the kids, the families, the people at large? Why is that message just not resonating with Republicans?
You have an entire party of people who don't truly care about children. They don't care about our communities. Their allegiance is not to that Constitution we swore on. Their allegiance is not to the 7 million people in our state and the over 70 to 80% of people who want to see gun safety reform legislation. Their allegiance is to the gun lobbyists. Their allegiance is to the National Rifle Association and the Tennessee Firearms Association. And if you're not proximate to the people like the Mothers at Covenant or mothers like LaVonda Thorne Henderson, the mother of one of my classmates who was murdered in January, if you're not proximate to these folks who are mourning and who are crying and who are asking for us to do something, then you continue to legislate from a place of privilege and from a position that really is not paying attention to what is going on in our communities and the tragedies and the experiences of the people who have had to be and live as survivors of these tragedies in our state. And I believe that's what's happening with this Republican Party. There's a lack of moral courage and there's a lack of a moral compass. And so we continue to pass immoral legislation. We continue to do harm to people who are asking for us to actually create change by presenting false solutions instead of presenting solutions that we know could actually save kids' lives, like the removal of permitless carry, which is a law that we passed, like ensuring we have gun safety storage legislation and universal background checks.
I've got less than a minute, but I did want to ask this last question to you, Representative Pearson. How do we make it matter? How do we make them care? How do we remove the proximity need so that these people that are in the process, in the seats of power, that are not listening to what the people want in terms of reasonable gun control, how do we make them care?
We must show up anyway. That is our responsibility as people who want to be civically engaged and want to make this democracy what we know that it can be. We have to show up even amidst adversaries, even amidst people who do not want to see justice, who do not want to see change, who want to kick us out for signs, who want to stop our voices from being heard, who want to expel members. We show up anyway. We give our best anyway, just as our ancestors did 60 years ago at the state capitol. We show up and we have our voices heard. We have our voices heard to elevate the issues of our community, just like those 250,000 people did on the March on Washington. Every time that we go to the state capitol, it is our march on Nashville. It is our march for democracy and for justice. And so for everybody who gets tired and gets weary, let us not be weary in well-doing, and let us continue to show up and let them know that our voices will not be silenced and that you can't wait out a movement and you can't expel one either.
I got chills, and I don't think thank you is enough to say to you. We show up, and that's what we're going to do. Tennessee State Representative Justin J. Pearson, we will show up. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you.